on the Twitch. And I want to do a little discussion video for all of my lovely viewers. Of course, this will be uploaded to TESVI and YouTube once we're done here. But something came across my radar that I wanted to talk and tell you people about. And let's wait for the Ghost in the Shell advertisement to end. Before I begin. So, for those of you who may know, I am moving, and so I'm kind of in the chaos of the move. So, I just woke up from basically passing out after doing a bunch of packing, and I was watching a video where basically someone who's big on analyzing fantasy and whatnot, and seeing how fantasy races work in a realistic setting and all that. And he was giving his thoughts on Skyrim, and as I was while watching that, I noticed a popular discussion in the comments, and a discussion I've seen many times, where people talk about, you know, voice acting and the voice protagonist for the Elder Scrolls, 6. Actually, it should be the I, not IV, but whatever. But so I want to talk about that because there seems to be quite a lot of buzz about people saying, "Oh, the protagonist should be voiced in the Elder Scrolls 6 Black Marsh or whatever it's going to be." And there are other people saying how, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. Look how terribly it was done in Fallout 4." And considering that I'm modern, considering one of the mods that I produced for Fallout 4 was turning Japanese, yes, I'm turning Japanese, yes, I think so, which basically replaced all the player dialogue with Japanese while still keeping your game in English and still having English subtitles and all that. And this really got me to take a deep look at the audio and voice files of that. And as I saw the discussion, I got to thinking, no one really quite grasp just how much work is in Skyrim and Fallout when it comes to voice, and I wanted to address that issue. Because you guys have no idea. So what you see here on the screen is Skyrim Special Edition and Fallout 4 with the audio files extracted. So the one on the left side of the screen, this one here, this is just the player voice files for Fallout 4 with all the DLCs. Now this of course is both male and female protagonists. On the right is of course the voice files for Skyrim, which is of course just NPCs because there is no voice acting in Skyrim. So what happens if we do properties and go pull up, oh look at that. See how many files that is, folks? Yeah, in Fallout 4, for both the male and female player characters, there are 154,422 voice files. Divide that by half, and you get 77,211 voice files for just a single gendered character. Okay, that sounds impressive. We've heard the numbers before. The voice actors had to record about 70,000 lines. Here's the rub. Let's look at Skyrim's total numbers. Again, let's look at total numbers here. You see those numbers there, folks, don't you? Every single NPC voice, which we all know in Skyrim has a lot of recycled voices, a lot of people with the same voices, but all of the NPC voices, every single one of the NPC voices, comes to a total of 75,408 for every single NPC in Skyrim. Now doing a little bit of quick numbers of math, that means that the Fallout 4 protagonist, who has across all the DLCs, and again we're comparing all DLC to all DLC, so it's a fair comparison, is 77,211 for just a single character, whether it be your male protagonist or your female protagonist. 77,211 voice files versus 75,408 voice files. That's right, a single gender run in Fallout 4 with whatever protagonist you're running has more audio, for as much as people decry it, than every single NPC in Skyrim combined. Every single NPC in Skyrim combined. Your Nate playthrough of Skyrim, of Fallout 4, has more lines of dialogue than every single NPC in Skyrim combined. Your Nora run through of Fallout 4 has more lines of dialogue than every single NPC in Skyrim combined. I'm harping on this because I want you guys to truly understand the sheer scope of this. Now, you want to introduce voice acting to the player protagonist in Skyrim, a game that has 10 races. Argonians, Khajiits, Imperials, Nords, Bretons, Dunmer, Bosmer, Altmer, Ossamer, and Redguard. I really should have kept all the elf races together, that way I wouldn't have gotten lost. 10 races, 2 genders. So, just by going by the Fallout 4 standard, if we multiply those numbers out, we get 1,544,220 individually voiced and recorded lines of dialogue to represent all 10 races and all 20 genders. Do you guys understand the sheer scope of this? Is it sinking in why a voice protagonist in an Elder Scrolls game is a horrible idea? And that's a voice protagonist that's only at Fallout 4's level, not at like other game levels, not at Witcher levels, just at Fallout 4 levels of quality, because everyone riffs on that. 1,544,220 individually voiced lines of dialogue. That's 20 actors, each doing 77,211 lines of dialogue for all DLCs. You realize how ludicrous that is. Let me put this in another perspective. It's literally the equivalent of hiring all of the NPC actors and recording all of their lines for the next 20 games. Yeah. The Fallout 4 protagonist combined is twice the amount of dialogue as all of the NPCs in Skyrim. All of them. So if you do that, expand it out to cover all the races, you've done more work for the player protagonist, of which only a handful will ever play. What was the poll that, was it Violent Puma or, no, I think it was Camelworks. Camelworks said that the top-rated Skyrim race on his poll for when he was doing a Test 6 talk was Dunmer, followed by Argonians. So if those numbers pair through, if those are the races that get played the most often, then out of your 1,544,220 individually voiced lines of dialogue, only 1/10 of that is going to be used. And of that 1/10, we're looking at, whatever the breakdown is for gender, because I don't know the gender ratios for players in Skyrim. Which means you have another 8/10 that will probably never be heard. And yet you're still going to pay 20 different people to voice, well, in this scenario, will be more widespread. We'll say 16 different people who rarely ever have their voices heard. That means 4 out of your 20 people, because you're male and female for the top 2 races, are getting heard the most. It also means that you have spent more money and more hard drive space to cover your player protagonist than every single NPC in the game. I want you guys to realize just the sheer scope of how insane this is, because by putting that much focus on the player protagonist, do you really think that they're going to have the energy, the time, the resources to put it towards the NPCs or to the gameplay? Because game design is an industry. There's a give and a take. If you're going to spend, let's be honest here, it literally is 20 times. Well, 10 times because, anyway. So if you're going to have to spend 10 times as much on your player protagonist as you did on Fallout 4, because you have to hire 10 actors. Well, you have to hire 20 actors for 10 races. And you're going to spend all that time in the recording booth. And as we have heard numerous times through many different stories about how Bethesda is really, really involved in making sure that the players understand the characters. What was it that Nate's voice actor said? That at one point Bethesda actually gave him a copy of Fallout 3 so he understood the game that he was voice acting for? Like, can you imagine having to do that level of investment for 20 people? This is what people don't seem to be grasping the concept of. It's physically impossible for you to do voice acting for the next Elder Scrolls game. It's just not going to happen. Because if they do that, something else has to give. That means either they cut down to, what, a tenth of the audio lines for the other NPCs? Which, let's face it, we all made this complaint numerous times. The voice acting in Bethesda games from the NPCs is pretty terrible, and will often have 2 or 3 characters standing next to each other, talking to each other, and they all have the same voice. We all know this terror, folks. And you want them to reduce the budget for the other voice actors even more. Just so you can get your player Khajiit voice, which maybe I would play the player Khajiit. But how many other people are going to play the player Khajiit? How many people are going to play the Nord? The numbers don't lie. The most popular races are Dunmer and Argonian. And of that, I don't even know the gender ratios of that. So, the next time you start spouting out your nonsense about how, the Elder Scrolls 6 needs to have a voice player protagonist. Remember these numbers, folks. That a single voiced player protagonist, a single gender, in Fallout 4 has more lines of dialogue, equivalent, but still more, than every single NPC in Skyrim. Every single NPC in Skyrim. And if we extrapolate that out to cover all 10 playable races, because again, Skyrim, you're looking at quite literally 20 times the voice work. It's just not possible. Now, I know that there are mods out there. I've installed them in the past, which do various tweaks to voices. But honestly, as cool as the voice morphers are, as cool as it was playing with female Preston Garvey, or deeper voice for Strong, or higher-pitched male protagonist, those are still basically auto-tuned voices, auto-morphed voices, what have you. Do you guys really want Bethesda to just voice pitch shift, 2 actors? Do you really? And especially for like all the the unique nuances of the different races. So you're either going to have a pitch shifted Khajiit who's going to talk like a Nord, and there'll be no actual racial diversity in their audio lines, which doesn't seem like a thing Bethesda would do. Bethesda doesn't seem like the type that if they're going to go and do voice protagonists for the player races, they're going to have them each talk a little bit differently. I mean, just compare the any two scenes in Fallout 4, played from the male protagonist perspective and the female protagonist perspective. The voice lines are similar, yes, you're still following the same general path, but there are nuances in those different voices. You don't think that, hell, even though it's technically supposed to be the same character, just look at the actual backstory we have in Fallout 4. The male protagonist, Nate, is a war veteran from a family of a military family. His father was in the military, he's in the military, his son will presumably be in the military. What does Nora have? She's a lawyer. Two completely different stories. One, granted, a lot more fleshed out than the other, but two completely different stories and backgrounds, just for what is essentially the cosmetic choice, the player gender. So yeah, just wanted to get those thoughts out there, folks. See you in the future.